set with the Poltergeist panel. I'd like to bring to the stage Oliver Robbins and Martin Casella.
Volunteers that have been with us the last few days doing stuff.
Give it up for volunteers, everybody. Yeah.
It's Julie and Austin. And that's Oliver. I'm Marty.
Alrighty, let's start off with an easy question. How did you both get involved in the film?
I've been doing commercials full time in LA, and it was an open call, and I guess that would help. I was in commercials in LA, and it was an open call. They saw hundreds of kids, maybe thousands of kids, I think, at this point. And they were about to go into production. They were desperate at this point. And I came across, and they interviewed me, and they said the storyline was top secret. And they asked, Oliver, what are you afraid of? And I said, well, I'm afraid of like clown dolls and putting trees outside my window. Basically, I gave them a laundry list of everything I was possibly afraid of. And they said, that's Robbie. That's actually the character. And so I went through this entire audition process, and I was down to the wire. And I guess Tobe said to me, the most important thing, one of the key elements of a horror movie is you have to be able to scream. And I couldn't scream. Nothing would come out when I screamed. So there's people in LA who specialize in teaching you how to scream. And that's important if you're going to do a horror movie. So I learned how to scream, and that's the thing that put it over the top, and I ended up getting the part. And that was an audition process for Poltergeist. For me, at least.
I actually, when I got out of college, I got a job in our family business, which ended me up working somehow through a series of events with Steven Spielberg. I was his assistant for 3 years, and right when I got out of college. And after that, I went back to what I had studied, which was acting and writing in college. And I left working for him right after we finished Raiders of the Lost Ark. And about 2 months later, I got a call from the casting office, and they said, Steven knows that you've dropped back to acting. We're having trouble casting one of the roles in the movie. Would you come in and read for us? And I couldn't even believe that. I didn't have a SAG card. I didn't have anything. And so I came in the car on the way to the place where I had to do the video tape. That's how they did casting then. I practiced. I knew because I was there when they were writing the script. So I practiced screaming in the car. That's what Oliver said, because you have to be able to scream. And I practiced like whispering in a low voice and gasping. And they taped me. And a couple months later, I found out actually from Spielberg himself. He was the one who called and said, "We're really happy to let you know that you're in the movie."
One of the things that maybe needs cleared up the most about the film, you always hear on the internet and rumors that although Tobe Hooper is credited as the director of the film, that Steven Spielberg actually had a heavy hand in the creativity department and during the making of the film. Being on set, knowing this world, how much involvement did Steven have as opposed to Tobe?
Being a filmmaker myself, I always like to think filmmaking is a collaborative effort. And for me, it's like the end justifies the means. I mean, it really doesn't matter who does what. We're working as a team effort. And obviously, a lot of people don't realize this, but Steven wrote the original screenplay for Poltergeist, so he had a real definitive vision. And being a writer myself, you really want to protect that vision. And you want to be able to step in and work with the director. And Steven did that with Tobe. And I know he had as a kid, I wasn't really privy to everything that went on. But as far as I know, Tobe directed me, but Steven was there every day. And I know Tobe and Steven worked very closely together to, bring alive the vision that Steven had in mind when he actually wrote the original script. And he basically did that, what any writer would probably want to do, make sure that what he sees on the page makes it to the screen. And at the same time, Tobe was able to complement it with all of his super talents, because he directed Texas Chainsaw, and he brought something really special to the movie. And as an actor, it was wonderful to work with someone like Tobe, because he's the one who let me be free, let me improv, let me just be a kid. I was so spoiled in that movie, because so many films after that, I didn't really have the opportunity to just be improv, make up lines, and a lot of those lines actually did make it into the movie. And Steven, as the writer, allowed Tobe to allow me to do that. So that was my experience, in terms of that whole controversy that went on.
Yeah, I think I basically had the same experience as well, which was the acting notes that you would get mostly came from Tobe. Steven was more concerned that we were getting the right tone. You know, obviously there's certain camera moves in the movie that you watch and you go, oh, that's a Spielberg move. When Joe Beth runs down the hallway, that's the same camera thing, the trick that they do in Jaws. When Roy Scheider realizes his kid's in the water, and they do, it's like, it's a dolly counter zoom, right? And it makes you feel almost like you have vertigo when you're watching it, because all the frame just goes out of whack. And Steven was concerned with things like that. I actually did a little bit of second unit shooting for a scene that got cut, that Steven actually did. He was in charge of that. They were shooting the first unit downstairs, and then there was a little sequence that I had to do upstairs, and Steven was there for that. But otherwise, Tobe was there, the one calling the shots and sort of telling us what to do in terms of acting.
Now, there's been several documentaries made about the Poltergeist Curse. Talk about your feelings being there. Do you think the set was cursed? Did you buy into that?
I live in fear every day now, and I have crucifixes on the wall, and yeah, you really don't get too close to me because, you know, lightning might strike, you might be taken out. But don't let that deter you from talking to me at the tables. No, in reality, no, I think everything is just a lot of horrible, tragic things that happen, and people really just try to connect the dots and, you know, try to make something that really isn't there. And it's great entertainment, I guess, in a morbid kind of way. And at the end of the day, you know, we've lost some wonderful people that could have really contributed to our planet in many different forms. And we shouldn't have really lost them. And I don't think it had really anything to do with really a curse. And fortunately, the reality is a lot of these people had conditions and diseases before they actually made the movies. And, you know, they died obviously after film because that was their destiny at that point. So yeah, in terms of if there's a curse, I don't really believe there is a curse. I believe fate and destiny and all those kind of things, and metaphysical being. But I don't think that you know, because we were in this movie, that's why these people have died. You know.
Keep the mic.
Okay.
I couldn't have said it any better.
Okay.
I completely agree with you. Yeah.
Okay.
It is spooky though when they call you, because I've gotten Oliver knows. You've gotten calls as well, right? I got calls from documentary filmmakers and they're saying, "Oh, would you participate in this?" And I said, "I don't really have anything to tell you. It wasn't like things fell out or your lights didn't fall on people or things like that. It's a regular normal shoot."
Yeah, we didn't have any Final Destination kind of moments, like planes would like break free and fly across the set and we almost died. You know, there was nothing like that.
Martin, I wanted to ask you about the bathroom scene and maybe some of the special effects and set up that minute for that. Can you speak about that?
Sure. When I got the part, I kind of was, how is this going to happen? And then about 2 months before we shot, one of the production manager called me and said, "We are setting up an appointment for you to meet with the special effects." I can't remember, it wasn't Douglas did the optical ones. The physical was Craig, a guy named Craig. And yeah, Craig Reardon. And I had to go to his studio, which I think was over in like Culver City somewhere near MGM, where the movie was shooting. And I didn't know what they were going to ask me to do. And when I got there, I basically had to take my shirt off, and they covered my body from the waist up in plaster of Paris. And he stuck 2 straws up my nose, and then covered my head with plaster of Paris. And they made a half torso cast of me. And I said, "Well, what's going to happen here?" I thought it would be prosthetics or something. And he said, "No, it's going to be you, and then it's going to be this dummy." And so I had to sit there, and it's like when you read stories about that, I mean, especially for lots of horror films, people have to make body casts to be killed and this and that. Well, it's terrible because you can't move for about 4 hours, and you're breathing through straws in your nose, and you can't eat, and you can't even get up to go to the bathroom because you're covered in plaster. So I didn't know what to expect. And when I actually got the set to shoot that scene, it was incredibly, leading up into the bathroom, it was so complicated. I think we did 28 takes of me wandering through that kitchen because there were practical lights, there was lights coming through that was supposed to be the moon, and it was my first movie. I had been a stage actor, and I just couldn't pick up the chicken legs and chew it, and then the thing, and flash the light, and so 28 takes later, Tobe said, that's the one that we wanted. And I was so wiped out when they said, "Okay, now we're going to shoot the bathroom scene." and I said, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" And he said, "Well, basically you're going to look in the mirror, take your jacket off, look in the mirror, you first what I had to do was, they can't hurt the maggots, because maggots are human creatures, and they have to be able to put that sign that says no animals were injured in the making of this movie. So they actually had a maggot handler, and there was a guy there who was sent from the company, and he had the maggots that were taken out of the little box, and they put them on the chicken leg on the floor. So I had to be really careful, and the camera guys had to be careful. But they couldn't have me throw up maggots. So what they did was, they made me take 2 huge spoonfuls of rice, that was like instant rice, and then he made me drink a giant glass of water. And I wasn't allowed to swallow. And I had to hold the rice and the water in my mouth for about 40 minutes until it puffed up, and it didn't look like rice anymore, it looked like little live maggots. And they told me, okay, now swish them around in your mouth, and when we yell action, you run over to the sink and pretend like you're throwing up maggots in the sink. And I was like, okay, you don't know what to say. It's like, okay, fine. And that room was very tiny. It was a little sort of bathroom closet. And they had a camera in there, and they had and Steven was there because it was a major scene in the film, and he wanted it to look right. And Tobe was there, and we had, assistant directors, this and that, and the lighting guys. And so I basically threw up rice in the sink, and then they had a woman come and sort of touch me up and put little, like, blood marks and things on my face. And they said, okay, now go like this, and go like that, and sort of pick at stuff. And I'm like, okay. And I did that, and they said, okay, that looks great, you're done. And I said, well, what's gonna happen? And he said, oh, we're just gonna bring your dummy in, and then we're gonna shoot it. And I said, right now? And he said, yeah. And so they brought this spectacularly beautiful dummy, like from here up. It looked like I had been dissected, like in a horrible, Final Destination movie. And they said to me, we all have to be really careful, because they had matched my hair. I had long hair in the movie, as you know, and big glasses. And they matched my hair exactly. And they said, everybody be very careful around the wig. In 1981, that wig cost $10,000. That was on my head. And the whole dummy together was about $50,000. And the dummy was so perfect, and they put it there, and let's just say, because it was my first film, I had a little trouble doing some of these things. It was hard for me. I had not been in a movie before. And I turned to Steven, who by that point I had known for almost 4 years, and I said to him, I would feel a lot more comfortable if this was not my job to do this take, because I had trouble finding my light, and we had some problems here, and I said, would you do it? Well, that was like asking a child if they wanted to go into like FAO Schwartz and buy candy and toys. He looked at me and he said, for real? And I said, yeah. And I just handed him my watch, I handed him my ring, we put a shirt on him, there was an extra shirt there on the set. And there's a great photo, I did a podcast a couple weeks ago in LA, and this guy had the photo, and it's Steven down on his knees in front of the mirror with my head there in the mid. And plus, they've got 2 puppeteers on the floor next to him who are pulling strings so the eyes open and close, and then the mouth open and closes like it's screaming. And Steven's in between them, and the trick was that it was so expensive. And one of the reasons it was only 1 take was because they had taken this weird viscous blood-like stuff that was supposed to be my blood, and they froze it into ice cubes. And then they put them under the skin at the last minute of the dummy, and then they had guys on either side of me holding hot air blow guns, like hair dryers, really, really hot air dryers. So, as just like 2 minutes before the scene started, they pointed the air guns at the ice cubes, and the ice cubes began to melt, at which point Steven got down on his knees, and it was Steven, I think Tobe was working with the kids or something, and Steven said, okay, everybody, we can only do this once. Everybody stand by. He said, don't anybody move, like don't even breathe. And he said, action, and they started shooting, and he went to town, and he pulled. I mean, you see all that tearing and pulling and the gloppy stuff, that was all the blood packs that had been frozen, melting into little pieces and falling into the sink, and he went nuts. I mean, he was full of, and they cut it, and they check. The first thing they do is check the cameraman and make sure there's not like a hair on the grate or a lens or any kind of thing. And he said, the camera guy said, no, we got it. It was perfect. And Steven said, well, there's still some of it left. Let me go do it again. So he knelt back down one more time, and he just, by the time the dummy looked like a Thanksgiving turkey about 4 days later. There was nothing left on it at all. And he was very happy about that. And the final piece of it was 3 months later, I was doing a play where I had to have very short hair in the play, so they cut most of my hair off. And the MGM people called me and said, we have to do some insert shots and retakes of you pulling the dummy's face. And I went, oh no, my hair is this long. I look like somebody in the Marines. And he said, oh, that's no problem. We have the wig. We save everything. Until the movie gets released in the theaters, all that stuff had been held in a warehouse somewhere. So I showed up. They put the dummy on my head, the dummy's wig on my head, and they took me down to the set, and I said, what am I doing? And he said, we're going to put huge prosthetic devices on you and fill them with blood. And so, now, because it doesn't cut from you going like this to the dummy being crazy and pulling off huge chunks of flesh. So I said, okay, and they sent me upstairs to the makeup room, and the makeup woman worked on me for 3 hours to get everything so it looks all real and nothing's leaking. And they had pictures of me, and so they said, oh, we have to put it on the right side. In the mirror, we can see it, it's on his right side. Or actually, she just said it's on his right side. And when we got downstairs, Frank Marshall, the producer, was doing that because it was extra work. So he directed it. And when we got and I looked in the mirror, and they had the Polaroids, because the makeup woman was looking in the mirror, she put it on the wrong side of my face. So and they had people all around me with rags because the stuff was starting to bleed, and they only had 3 shirts because this was supposed to be just a really easy retake. So they were like people holding me, and I looked like someone had slit my throat because the blood was starting to bleed. And they had to send me downstairs and remove everything. And something that was supposed to take like an hour ended up taking an entire day. And they finally got the shot later that afternoon. So that's my memory. It was, sorry to go on for so long, but it's, when you see the movie, there are clearly 3 pieces of what's going on. So, yeah, that's what it was like. You weren't there, so you didn't.
I was there that one day when I wanted to be there.
When Steven did it.
Yeah,
when Steven did it, you were there.
I needed to be there for that. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I wanted to be there. I said, when are they pulling that face apart? I was so excited because I saw that face sitting in the makeup trailer. So I made certain, and I asked him, what are you going to do? And they told me, tear this apart. I remember putting on the jewelry, and yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, a lot of people came to watch some of that stuff. So.
Now, Oliver, when watching the film, I think out of all the actors, you portrayed fear the best. As a child actor, were you ever scared on set?
No, I really had very little acting experience prior to this. I'd done maybe 2 commercials, and I had a fearful childhood. I grew up in this haunted townhouse in New York City, and I believe to this day this thing was haunted. I heard people like walking up the stairs, and I was scared, and that's what I kind of tapped into when I was shooting the movie. When they said, "You're thinking of something scary. What are you thinking about?" And I thought about this crazy townhouse we lived in Manhattan. If that was really just me being myself. I had really so little training at all, too. And I remember Tobe would say, just big eyes, you're terrified, you're really afraid, something's coming at you. And Tobe would just talk me through a lot of these scenes, because what they did is we never really saw the special effects, the entire shoot. Everything is laid in after the fact. So people would they'd give you an eye line, see that little that mark on a piece of tape over here, that's where the ghost is coming in, and then follow your eye line over here, but if you're getting more scared, you're terrified, and you're screaming at it, and that's what we all did. Because we never really saw in any of the effects, until Ion put in everything that you guys saw. So, the basic bottom line is I just really tapped into my terror growing up in New York City.
Talk about the clown.
Oh, in the clown doll scene, I'm told that I almost died during the making of this. I had no idea, I have no recollection, but everyone says it happened, so I guess what happened was that Steven rescued me when the clown doll arm got caught around my neck or something. I was just so into it. I don't even really remember that too. And the way the clown doll scene was shot, they used a backwards camera because they didn't have CGI and all the special effects. It was all in camera and all practical. So basically what I had to do is act backwards. They said start at the pinnacle of your fear, so you're completely terrified, the most fear you can have, and then become normal. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull a little arm away from you. And then when we play forward, it'll look like the arm's going around your neck. So it's all, every day on the set there was some new challenge, and I was just having a blast because I said, what am I going to do now? I'm going to talk about a tree. Today's the clown doll scene, And I said, you're gonna act backwards? And I said, yeah, it totally makes sense when you're a kid. Everything's gonna be fun.
So you also, when I was talking to you at your table, you said the room actually turned?
Yeah, this was complete, I think they called it the gimbal room.
Yeah.
And it was the same technique that they use where Fred Astaire dances around the ceiling. The room rotates, and the camera's mounted on one side. So in my case, the room rotated down, the camera's mounted below, and then we're hanging it. So from the camera's perspective, it looks as if we're actually hanging and being sucked into the closet. And what they did is we were harnessed in with wires, so we're fully protected. And then they did something called rotoscope, is where they they didn't have digital, they blew up every frame of the film, I guess. And an artist actually painted it out. Today you can digitally go in, anyone can really do it. And instead they actually had to paint out every shot, and I guess they reanimated it with, so basically that's how they did that whole sequence. And I was supposed to just be afraid again and being sucked into the closet.
And that's the same technique they used when Joe Beth gets dragged around the walls near the end of the movie. They used that same gimbal room to do that. And she was basically always on the floor. It was the camera that was revolving. I think Nightmare on Elm Street, somebody knows, they used the same technique in that. But I didn't know that until yesterday when I was asking Oliver how he was doing the flying when the closet was trying to suck him inside.
I think it was just on a 90-degree angle. Yeah, that section was only a 90-degree angle. And once again, I was amazed. It was like being on a Disneyland ride. It says the room's going to rotate over, and you're going to be harnessed and you're going to be hanging there. So pretend like you're holding on for dear life. So I had a blast doing that film.
Yeah. Like he said, every day it was something else. I asked him this morning if he remembered the scene when the ghost, I forget what it does, but it makes a big noise, and then we all get hit with this supersonic blast of air. And I was asking Oliver if he remembered that happening to him, because what they didn't tell us was that they put Fuller's Earth in the giant air gun. These huge giant air guns that they shot at us. And we rehearsed it without any Fuller's Earth in it. And as Oliver said, they wanted to get a real reaction from us. So when those things blew at us at 80 miles an hour, they shot dirt at us, like fine grains of dirt. And so when you see in the movie, we're all like this, what hit them? That's what it was. It was this blast. And we had to do that for hours.
Yeah,
Hours of this giant air gun blowing air at us for 80 miles an hour. It was like Disney.
It was every day was a new ride. And I remember it was just the way they approached me as a kid too. It was never this is a job, you have to be serious and you have responsibility. They said, we're gonna have a lot of fun. I remember Frank Marshall would say to me, Oliver, you're gonna love it. It's gonna be like camp. And you're gonna love it. We have this whole house, and you're gonna, because they built an entire house on a soundstage. It's like an aircraft hangar.
On stilts.
On stilts too. And they have multiple rooms, and they just introduced it to me you're gonna have the best time of your life. And I just loved going to that set every day, and they had to drag me away. And that's why I kind of fell in love with making movies too.
The set, because of the coffins coming up out of the floor and the swimming pool in the backyard, which was so we're in a giant soundstage about twice this size and much higher roof, a roof that was 2 or 3 times this high. And the entire house, the Freeling house, the driveway, the front door, the backyard, and the swimming pool, and the fence was all on a giant soundstage, 15 feet in the air, so that they could do the things coming up out of the ground. So when we get to work every morning, we had to climb up ladders to go up, and the whole crew was up there. They built it, they reinforced it, so that all the cameras, the crew, and everybody could be okay up on this thing. And later on, at the end of the movie now, we see when she runs out the front door and the coffin pops up, they had guys with giant air guns shooting those things up out from under the floor on the soundstage.
I remember that shot, the last scene of the movie, when the coffin comes out and it's blocking our path. I remember we had to do that 50 times too. That was they basically, you could get a take in maybe 4 or 5, but they shot till they got what they wanted, which is beautiful, in terms of getting what you do want to see on the screen. And, budget really wasn't a concern. That's why I think Poltergeist is as good as it is, because they really, truly they got their vision.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I was just curious how Poltergeist got first the MPA when it was R-rated, and eventually it came out PG. And was there heavy editing, or is Steven Spielberg just made it magic? How did that happen?
I wasn't really privy to how that process worked. Do you know anything about that?
I don't remember them cutting anything. I think he just kind of, it was MGM, which was really powerful at the time, and I think it was Spielberg, and they just kind of strong-armed them, and they may have trimmed little tiny pieces here and there, but the real one that caused all the hoopla was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and that because of pulling the scene where they pull the guy's beating heart out of his chest and eating monkey brains and Kate Capshaw screaming for 2.5 hours. That was the one. I think they created PG-13 because of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Yeah, that was when they flipped over into that rating. But ours, I think some states tried to rate our film R, like independently, and they tried to say no, kids can't see this movie. But yeah, and it was so funny because there were 3 children. Well, Dominique wasn't a kid at that point, but we had these guys.
Yeah, and compared to what's done today, you see on television, Poltergeist is very bland, in terms of the graphic nature of it.
The first day I went back to work, I told some people this earlier. The first day I went back to work, Steven met me at the door and he put his arm around me. He said, "We almost lost you." He said, "We were 5 minutes away from renting a private jet and flying you back to London to the hospital there." He said, "We set it all up, but you suddenly got better this morning." So that's the kind of guy he is. He is amazing. One more story, is that okay? One Steven story about what a great guy he is. I cut it down when I told you guys when I got the job. When I found out, I get choked up on this because it's my idea of who Steven is. And when anybody ever says to me, "Oh, come on, tell us bad stories," I'm like, I don't have any bad stories. When I got the call to go to the very first private screening of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Kathleen Kennedy, who now runs Star Wars and Lucasfilm and everything, she and I both started on the same day at work, and she worked her way up, and she called me and she said, "We're going to have a private screening that's only for the Paramount executives and the Lucasfilm executives and for us that worked with Steven for that whole year. And we need you to come to Paramount it's Tuesday night, and you need to be there at 7 o'clock. And I said, "Great, I am so excited to get to see this." And so I showed up Tuesday night at Paramount, and I went to the screening room, and I stood there, and nobody was there. It was finally 10 after 7, and all of a sudden, a Porsche that I recognized because 3 years before I was the one who had picked it up in Santa Monica and driven it to Steven's house and said, "Here's your new car." His Porsche pulls up, and he got out of the car, and he did what he always used to do if we were somewhere. He would just throw me the car keys, which means go park my car. And he didn't throw the car keys at me. And I said, "Hi, did I make a mistake? Is the screening not tonight?" And he said, "Oh no, it's tonight." And I said, "Oh, okay." He said, "Yeah, I wanted to have a couple minutes. I wanted to see how you were doing and what you're doing." And I said, "Well, I'm in a play and I won this award and blah blah blah." And then he got this little, we called it the Steven grin, and he has this little grin, and he went, "Oh, I hear you're in a movie too." And I said, What are you talking about?" He said, "Yeah, I was in the office today and somebody came up and told me they'd cast you as your role that you auditioned for in Poltergeist." And then he just smiled and he said, "Congratulations." And I said, "Wait, you came here a half an hour before the screening to tell me that?" And he goes, "Yeah, I wanted to be the one to tell you." He said, you gave your life to me for 3 years, and this is kind of what we wanted to reward you for that." So he's a great guy, and my sister has the same exact kind of stories about him.
Yeah, I mean, Steven is like that. He's just a wonderful. He changed my entire life on so many levels. I mean, I found I was going to be a lawyer or an architect or a police officer, but then I fell in love with filmmaking, and Steven saw my love for it. I had a crappy, really junky Super 8 camera my parents got because I didn't have video really at that. And I showed Steven my first little movie, and he said, "You know what?" He didn't say anything. And then one day he brought this silver case to the set of Poltergeist. And I said, and he didn't tell me what it was. And I said, "This is for you." And it was the most fancy, it was his camera. It was a Super 8 Bolio 5008S. It was at the top of the line, the best Super 8 camera you could possibly like. You do everything with this thing. And he said, "Go out and make movies."
Yeah. That's the kind of thing. And what's funny is that you work hard when you work for Steven. A friend of mine used to call it the sacred mission for Steven. I mean, you have to remember, guys, this was back before cell phones. This was back before any kind of communication system. So when you were sent off to go do errands, you basically depended on the kindness of public telephones in booths that were around the city, and you constantly have to be going back and forth and figuring things out. And for Steven, often when we were working on Raiders at Lucasfilm, we'd often get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and most of the time we would be playing video games up until, it was the Asteroids, the old Asteroid games, those were new then. And Steven and Kathy and I and Frank Marshall would be in our offices until, 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes, playing Asteroids and games. Steven's like, oh, I want to see this movie. Could you arrange for a screening this week? Yeah, sure. So I was so used to working for him, and he produced a movie called Used Cars with Kurt Russell that Bob Gale wrote, and Bob Zemeckis directed it. And Steven said, you know what, I'm taking a few months off, and I had known Bob Zemeckis from 1941, and he said, Bob wants you to be his assistant for 3 months on the shooting of Used Cars. Do you want to do that? And I said, yeah, I'd do that before we go to New Raiders. So I got on the set on the first day of Used Cars, and I saw Bob Z, and he walked up to me, he goes, hi, and I said, Bob, I'm so happy to be here, this is so great that you're directing this. And he said, well, I know you've been with Steven for like 2 years now, is it okay if I ask him to get me a cup of coffee? I laughed out loud, and I'm like, oh please, I drove a brand new Porsche that cost $110,000. One night when it was the Oscars, I had to go buy him 5 different tuxedos because he wasn't sure which one. It was before they used to give people things to wear, and that was me going to every single department store in Beverly Hills, and I walked in with, I had about $40,000 worth of tuxedos one afternoon, and there's Bob Zemeckis going, did you mind, I take cream in it and stuff, and I'm like, that's easy. I can do that in my sleep, so, yeah.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody?
Just raise your hand, I'll come give you the mic.
Don't be shy.
Wow, you got such a good job.
Ask anything you want to know.
Well, one question I do have for Oliver. Talk about working on Airplane.
Yeah. Oh, Airplane was, I had the best experience as a child actor. I went for Poltergeist, which was, I was screaming every day, and then Airplane 2, that was like over-the-top comedy. I was getting pied in the face, and I worked with a cavalcade of actors who I'd grown up with, and I loved Airplane 1 so much. I told my agent at the time, I said, I heard they're doing a sequel, are there any parts for kids? And then lo and behold, there was. So I went and read for it, and I just begged the casting person. I said, I have to be in Airplane 2. I have to be in this movie. I love Robert Haig, Julie Hagerty, and they were just amazing to work with. And every day I got to do a joke, and I got to overact, because, Poltergeist, you're very real. And in Airplane, you're kind of in this hyper-reality. So I just love being funny for once, doing one-liners and taking pies in the face. And how often do you ever get to do that as a kid? Oh, yeah.
This is something most people don't know, and I told the guys earlier, I never would talk about it before because people would think I was lying and making this up, but last year Bob Gale did a big Back to the Future symposium. It was the 30th, 40th, whatever, 30th anniversary, I think, last year. And so Bob Gale did an interview and he talked about something, so I can share it with you guys now. When I was working on Used Cars, they came up to me one day while they were setting up lights, and they were working on the Back to the Future script. I had read the earlier draft. He said, we want to change some things in our script, and we want to do something, and we want your permission to do it. And I said, yeah. And he said, can we name our lead character after you? Because it's a really, really good alliteration. So I said, yeah, sure. So whatever it was, 5 years later or something, when I saw Back to the Future, and I realized his name's Marty McFly, they used my name to do it. And last year at the convention that Bob spoke at, he said, oh yeah, we named it after the guy who was our production assistant. And we have this, and he said something funny in the interview, like, hi Marty, wherever you are out there. So it's weird having not only Poltergeist, but this other little tiny bit of immortality, which is having one of the great characters of movies, having your name on it. So yeah, I know Oliver didn't even know that until about an hour ago.
And I love that. I think that film was just flawless, and everyone I was in film school with too. There's 2 movies everyone talks about at USC: Jaws and Back to the Future. I was even working on a script. There's a big studio office at 20th Century Fox, and we're like, and then I said, yeah, they knew I was in Poltergeist. They said, do you think Steven would look at the script and give us some notes on it? And these are people who have made movies that made $200 million too. That's how much they look up to Steven.
Well, part of the thing about Back to the Future is that it has that really weird, edgy incest sort of subplot thing going on. So it takes it right out of being this sort of safe comedy that's like, oh yeah, that's great, love it. And all of a sudden, about halfway through the movie, if you kind of realize what's happening, you're like, there's something really icky about this right now, right? So he's goes back in time and his mother falls in love with him.
I know, if you just pitched that idea alone.
Oh my God, the studios would be like horrified.
They
Oh no, it has to be a stepmother, right?
We
So-
can't even have that. We've got to change that immediately,
Yeah.
too. But sometimes you have to be a little bold, and I think that's what makes that film so different and amazing, too, that it's not so sick, you know?
That's it, and those are the kind of movies that always. You were telling me earlier something that we were talking about films that get turned down now, and when you go to pitch meetings and things, and anything's like remotely out of the ordinary. I mean, all of us know because I'm sure everybody was there the first day to see the new Star Wars and all the articles that came out about Star Wars. The fascinating thing was to find out that at the same time Star Wars was being released, 20th Century Fox had this really crappy book novel, or it was a film of this book called The Other Side of Midnight, and that was the movie they spent all their advertising on. And that one of the presidents of 20th Century Fox, when he saw Star Wars, said, "We have to find some way to dump this. This is terrible, and we're going to put it on double bills." They had that. George Lucas gave this great interview, and he said, "Oh yeah, they said this is awful." One of the presidents at Fox, and any kind of thing that's different or imaginative, it's like, no, we can't do that. Even Oliver told me, I haven't seen the remake of Poltergeist, but he told me that like in the first 10 minutes, they say, "Oh, your house is built on a graveyard," right? And it's like that's the big surprise at the end of the original because they knew the audiences could be patient and wait for that, and that would be the great reveal. And Oliver said, "Yeah, they go and tell you right off the bat."
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to really have some faith in audiences. Because, I always got this note when I was in studio, they said, "You have to get into the story faster. This is short attention span theater. People won't be able to handle sitting for 30, 40 minutes, getting to know the family." And you know what? I just watched Poltergeist last summer with people that are like, 17, 18, 19 years old, and they sat there and they're totally and completely engrossed and they love that. So it shows you that kind of filmmaking is timeless. And you don't have to jump into it that fast.
Yeah.
Because once you care about people in a movie and the characters, you can basically put them through anything and they'll be rooting for those characters.
That's to follow up on that. I spent last 4th of July. I was with like 3 generations of family, and we were all having it was a 4th of July party, and everybody was there. And that night, one of the channels showed Jaws, and most of the kids there, most of the 17, 18-year-olds, and the smaller ones hadn't seen it. And the older ones of us had seen it, and it was just sort of playing while we were all eating dinner, and people were laughing at it at the beginning and going, "This is so stupid, the shark ate the girl, this is so dumb." And then by halfway through, I noticed that everyone who had been in all the other rooms was in the television room watching, and then by the end of the movie, for the last 20 minutes, silence. And then people started screaming, like when Robert Shaw got chomped on by the thing. People, like the kids, the 17-year-old kids were screaming, and by the end of the movie, every single person in the house said, "Wow, that was good. What a great movie." And an hour before, they'd been going, "This is so dumb, this is stupid." And it's what you said. Like, give the audience some time. They're smart. They can figure it out.
And the characters are complex and really interesting in Jaws, too.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what
Not
I
in Jaws 2.
No, that's
No.
no,
Jaws also.
Jaws also, yes, not the sequel.
No, it's like you care about those people in Jaws. And someone told us, who told us, was it you or somebody who came to visit us on Friday said that in the original version of Jaws, Richard Dreyfuss was supposed to get eaten by the shark too, right?
I didn't know that.
Were you there? You
No,
guys
I
weren't
wasn't
there
there.
on Friday. But
No.
somebody was telling us the story. He was originally, but they couldn't get the shark to go with the shark tank or
Oh,
something, and so
that
they
would've been
changed it so he was alive at the end. So.
That would have been interesting, though, a little darker.
It would be much darker.
Yeah.
The studios wouldn't allow that.
They would have had them reshoot it today, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you for taking your time.
Thank you, guys.
Marty, Oliver, go ahead.
East Coast Horror Group.